Everybody's out there still gathering lunch. So are you guys all as excited as I am about information security? Oh, man, that was pathetic. Are you really as excited as I am about information security? That's a little better. That's a little better. I realize that would be better probably when happy hour starts later tonight. So I am here going to talk a bit today to you about modernized security for a digital native workforce. We're going to talk about what a digital native is. As Kerry mentioned, I work for GE Capital, have responsibility for one of their bigger businesses. We basically do B2B commercial loans and leases. I've been doing IT stuff for 25 years and security stuff for about 13. Thrilled to death to be out here in the Valley. And I suspect we have more digital natives in this audience than I do in a lot of the places that I do this spill, right? And so if you've seen or heard some of these stories before, I apologize in advance too. I know I see a few people like Leslie in the audience over there that's heard some of these stories before, so I apologize that you're going to hear the same ones. I want to start by talking about what's the definition of a digital native, or a definition. There are lots of definitions, but I kind of like this one, and it'll help get us to the point, I think. I'm going to read this. I promise it's like the worst slide I've got in terms of too many words. Twitch speed, multitasking, random access, graphics first, active, connected, instantaneous, digitally dependent, fun, fantasy, quick payoff, video gaming, tweeting, Facebooking, online living, no sense of privacy, crowdsourcing, entitled, digital native. All in one step. Yes, exactly. Now for me, I claim to have some experience because I have 4 digital natives myself. One 27-year-old, one 23-year-old, one 21-year-old, and one 18-year-old. I suspect that a few of you folks out there have also got some digital natives. I guess I'll ask, if we use kind of the range of, born between 1985 and 1990, how many digital natives do we have in the audience? Anybody's going to admit to it. I see a couple. 2 or 3, maybe 4. Not very many. I was kind of expecting more. We're out here in the high-tech valley. There's supposed to be more digital natives in the audience. I hear you. I agree with that. Of course, the interesting thing about this generation of folks, of course, they grew up with the digital devices. They are very rapidly coming into our workforce, and that's part of why I've kind of become passionate about going around and talking about, are we as security practitioners really thinking about the things that we need to in terms of digital natives? Because my argument is, look, there's no right or wrong or good or bad here, but I promise you, these individuals think differently than we do. We being the non-digital natives, and many of us will claim to be digital immigrants. They think differently, they solve problems differently, they have a different sense of work ethic, they have a different sense of privacy, they have a different sense of a lot of things. And we can take advantage of that, and I think part of our job is to help bridge the gap between kind of the generation that's currently largely in the workforce and this inbound generation of digital natives. Right? So you might ask yourself, well, why? Why does this difference exist? I mean, it's obvious that part of that's because of when they were born and they were grown up with a digital device. But let's talk through a few of those characteristics. Again, if I can get this thing to work. So here's an interesting statistic, right? And these slides are a little high, so I apologize for that. But here's some interesting statistics for you. In the 80s and 90s, the average college graduate had read, by the time they finished college, about 25,000 hours worth of books. I'm talking printed material like this right here, right? Today, the average college graduate has read only 5,000 hours of actual printed material, yet they've played 10,000 hours of video games, and they've watched 20,000 hours of video. Now think about that, right? Now it's not bad, right? It's just a different way that they've absorbed the same information that many of us sitting in the room read in books and what have you, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is the amount of time spent online actually doing things online. I don't mean you got your device in your pocket here. I mean you're actually doing things online. The statistics show right now that the average digital native spends about 7 hours a day online. Think about that, right? If you sleep for 8, whatever, you got 16 left, you're spending almost half of that, and this is growing rapidly, online doing something, right? And we'll look to our digital natives over here to verify whether or not some of this information is true. So you guys can keep me honest over there, right? You keep me honest, right? 3,000 texts per month. 500 for the average adult, the statistics show. You guys on board with that? You think you do about 500 texts a month? I can tell you I probably do, and I'll tell you why the number's that big. It's because I got 4 digital natives, and the only way you're going to communicate with those individuals is via text, largely, right? So this is another phenomenon. First mobile device around age 8. Now that's something we've watched over the last 10 years or so work its way down. At first it was, oh, well, Junior got a driver's license, so they're in a car and I'm worried and they might need emergency help if they have a problem with their car. So 16 was kind of okay, that's when I'm buying you your first mobile device. It's now 8 years old, folks. It's like first grade. Well, little Betty Sue is going off to school and I want her to be able to get a hold of us. So again, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's a fact, and this is some of the characteristics behind this. These more general characteristics over here are the things that I tend to say, these are things that make you go, right? YouTube now says that 100 hours of video is uploaded every 1 minute. Folks, every 1 minute. 9 billion, yes, that's a B for billion hours of video is now watched per month, right? And I'll tell a quick story there. My 23-year-old son, this is a couple of years ago, he had a car, right, a Mustang, and he had a tie rod screwed up on it, right? So he calls me up, he says, hey, Dad, can you help me fix this tie rod? I'm going to go buy the part, I can't afford to take it to the shop. I'm like, sure, son, bring it over, I've got the tools at my house, this, that, and the other. Of course, he brings the car over, I go out in the garage, and I'm trying to find where I've buried my Chilton's manuals. You guys remember Chilton's manuals? Yeah, I see some hands going up here. I'm looking for my Chilton's manual, figure out how to change this thing out. And he's like, oh no, Dad, that's silly, you don't need that book. I've already looked at 3 YouTube videos on exactly how to do this, and I got it solved. And he sets his little, Galaxy up and turns it on and says, here's all we got to do. Right? So again, I'm not saying this is bad. This is just facts, folks, and we need to be paying attention to that. A billion Facebook, I've now heard the new term. You guys heard this term? Mom book. You guys heard this term? I'm looking at the digital natives. Billion users, over 1 billion users on Facebook. I'm now hearing the term mom book. Most of the younger kids, at least, they have a Facebook profile, and what they put out there is what they want mom to see, because mom is also on Facebook and or connected through 14 other people to Junior's Facebook. And so the real stuff they're doing is no longer on Facebook and has moved off to other social media sites. So it's now being called mom book. Just to let you guys know, a little advanced secret there, right? 2.5 billion users on the internet, right? We crossed the 2 billion mark sometime last year. This is growing at 9 new net users per second, folks. That's about 800,000 new people a day on the internet. 300 million people a year, right? I mean, we're talking not very many years, the entire planet is going to be covered by internet. Of course, the mobile explosion and cheap wireless is part of what's driving that. Again, it's not bad, but it's important things for us to think about as information security practitioners, all right? And of course, with my paranoid security hat on, what I tend to say is that's 800,000 new potential bad guys every day coming onto the internet, and guess where most of them are coming from? Developing countries, via wireless and mobile, where they make $2 a day, and you know what? If I can earn $10 a day by doing a little cybercrime on the internet, why would I not do that? So I'm just saying, factor these things into the way that you're thinking about how the world is changing as we add mobile devices. India, I'll pick on India, and I probably won't do this much. Fact, right? There are more people in India that have mobile devices that connect to the internet than have toilets. This is a fact, right? There are 50 million people in Africa that have mobile devices that connect to the internet. They do not have electricity in their house, right? So just things to kind of chew on, right? 400 million tweets per day. I don't need to tell you guys the rest of this stuff. Lots of Pinterest users, and I could go on and on and on with all the social media and what's going on. Let's talk about a couple of more characteristics for these folks. They live publicly online. They have, again, as I mentioned, kind of a different sense of privacy. Again, not good or bad, just different, right? They share knowledge constantly. So, another story, right? 21-year-old, he's out at Texas Tech. Any Texas? No Texas Tech people out on the West Coast. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. But anyway, he's out at Texas Tech. He's studying engineering. He's in his dorm. He's on his laptop, the archaic, antique device that we bought him when he started school, that he never uses except when he absolutely has to, right? Because he lives on his Android phone. He's on his archaic device because he's doing calculus homework. The calculus homework is easier to see on the bigger output device on the laptop. So he's in his dorm room. He's working along. He's working on a calculus problem. He says, man, I can't remember exactly what the professor said about this particular problem. I know he taught us what to do, but I don't know what to do. Now, how does he solve that problem? How does he solve that problem, folks? He picks up his Android device. I have an iPhone, so it's not the same. But he picks up his Android device, and he takes a high-definition picture of the screen of the laptop, and he MMSs it to about 25 people he knows, including me. And he says, who can help me solve this problem? Of course, I went, holy crap, I haven't had calculus in like 40 years, right? There's no chance I'm helping you. But guess what? After about 10 or 15 minutes, he got several responses back, and one of them gave him the information he needed to solve his problem. He, MMSs back to everybody, hey, I've got my problem solved, I appreciate the help, let's all go meet at Chili's to have a beer or whatever, right? This is the way he works. This is the way he thinks. Now, how would I have solved that problem, right? I would have said, well, I understand Carrie's in the room probably somewhere. I understand Carrie's real good at calculus, there he is back there. I'm going to look on Outlook, Microsoft Outlook, and I'm going to set up a 30-minute meeting, and the next time he has some availability. Thursday, he's got a 30-minute opening. It's 30 minutes because by default, that's what Outlook puts, I think, as the meeting typically. And I'm going to go talk to him. And if he can't solve my problem, I say, well, I'll go try Bob over here next, right? So it's very sequential, and this is a very different way that the digital natives work and think. So that's sharing knowledge constantly. They believe transparency yields trust, right? So the more shared knowledge you've got yields trust. Timely, but not time managed. We come in, we punch the clock, we come to work at 8, we go home at 5. I realize we're all information security practitioners, and so that's really not the case. We're all working 24/7, constantly living off their BlackBerries and iPhones and what have you. But generally speaking, people are pretty time-boxed, and the digital natives are not. They believe in interactions, not transactions. I already mentioned there's some argument. I don't know if Larry's in the room someplace. He may have some data analysis. I know he's great at research, and he may have better data than I do, but there's argument between, does it start at 1985 or does it start at 1990? I don't think it necessarily matters. They see the telephone as intrusive, right? And I can tell you my daughter certainly feels that way, if none of my other digital natives, right? And the house better be on fire if you're actually calling me. Otherwise, you would absolutely have texted me first. You would never call me, right? And that's just a different way. Is that fair, guys? Pretty fair, right? And the analogy I use there is, I don't know my dates here, I'm not a history buff, but in the 1900s, if I wanted to go talk to my neighbor, I got on my horse or whatever, and I rode down to his house 4 miles away and knocked on his door, and I said, hey, I need to borrow a cup of sugar or whatever, right? And then along came the telephone, and when the telephone came along, guess what I didn't do? It became intrusive for me to just go show up and knock on your door without having called first. So this is kind of the same phenomenon. So again, just things to think about as you're thinking about the way digital natives think and work and act, right? So let's talk about concerns and issues. Video. I put that at the top because it's one of the number one things that I'm concerned about. Right? And I love to talk to anybody, drop me a line, you've got all my contact information, about if you've got great ideas on how to solve this video problem, right? You can pick this device up, you guys all know this, right? And I can record pretty well high definition. In fact, I got a bunch of high definition video here from the Maroon 5 Kelly Clarkson concert last week, if anybody's interested in looking at that. The point is, you can record a lot of high definition video on this thing, and we can't really control it. In the City of London, the statisticians say that in the City of London, there is absolutely no place you can stand in public where you are not being recorded by at least one device, right? So this is a huge security issue that I think is just getting to us, right? You can put all the encryption and protection and all that stuff, but if you've got somebody sitting there recording video, how many people have video at their house for alarms? How many people in the room? A handful, but that's growing rapidly. AT&T's probably here sponsoring something, so AT&T Digital Life, right? I'll give you guys a promotion there, right? This is coming, right? A lot of people have this, where if somebody comes, I want to check on my cat, I want to check on my kids, I want to know if the lawn guy is, doing something bad to my house. This is video, folks, and there's video indoors and outdoors. What if you're sitting there in your office, in your home office, working on confidential stuff on your machine, and you don't even think about the fact that your AT&T Digital Live video behind you is recording all that, and it's being stored somewhere up in the cloud? Are we thinking about these kinds of things? We should be, right? So video, from my perspective, is one of the biggest concerns we've got. And again, you can't stop it. I remember, years ago when the first cell phones showed up with cameras, and GE, now I'm picking on my own company, we immediately came out. It is absolutely, we're disabling every camera on the phone, And of course that did a lot of good because everybody just had their personal phone at that point in their other pocket, right? And the camera worked fine. So the point is we need to be thinking about these things. Risk outweighing productivity. This is nothing new. Why do people use all of these social media? Why do they use all this ability to collaborate and crowdsource and what have you? It's very productive. And we have to, I think, continue to push that, hey, do people understand the risk associated with that productivity? Or are we making conscious and correct decisions about the fact that it's costing us, right? You may opt for the productivity, but don't underestimate the risk associated with that. Bridging the gap, I just tend to say, okay, there's largely the group in this room, with the exception of about 3 people, we're all not digital natives. And the digital natives are coming into our world, and you get a lot of people that still do they're looking at their ESPN scores and they're texting their girlfriends and they're not doing a damn thing productive. You got a lot of people that still are kind of in that camp, and that's just not true. And the digital natives are coming in and going, well, wait a minute, I don't even want to work here if you guys won't allow me to use my social media tools. This is how I'm productive. And I think it's part of our responsibility to help bridge that gap. And we'll talk about maybe a couple of ways that will help you do that in the future. But that's a big issue, and I would argue a huge responsibility for us as information security practitioners to help bridge the gap between what's mostly the senior leaders of our big businesses, who, guess what, are almost all not digital natives. That may be a little less true out here in the Valley, I realize that. But the rest of the United States, that's largely true, and I think we have to work to bridge that gap, right? Skipping IT. So, the thing I like to do there is pull this American Express card out. I'll give American Express a promotion there too. Man, I should be getting paid for these promotional spots. I can get on Amazon, there's another promotional spot. I can get online, and in an hour, I can have a server, and I suspect most of you people in the room can do the same thing, up and operational, right, with cloud services. And so we better be paying attention. And again, the digital natives are very tech savvy, and they're very good, and they don't want to wait around on a bunch of bureaucratic stuff that slows the hell out of the cycle time in getting new stuff out the door. So we have to work to change that, because otherwise they're going to skip IT, and they're just going to go straight to the cloud, right? Why not? Unstructured data proliferation, not like that's a new problem for us. I get that. It's been a problem forever. We have our core data in our big machines that we have fairly protected. People make all sorts of copies of that data. That's going to continue to be an issue. I argue that video, of course, makes that even worse, because now I'm just going to video it. And if you start saying, well, I don't allow anyone to copy and paste data, well, they just record it, so be thinking about this, right? And be thinking about what you need to do to help educate people to understand the risk, right? Location-aware devices, again, we've all got that. That's good, I guess, if you have young teenage daughters and you want to know exactly where they are, or as I like to see, where their phone is, at least. But there's a lot of location-aware devices, almost all of our devices. Everyone begins to do that. They begin to check in, etc. Again, we just need to pay attention to that. that one kind of goes with always on real-time access. I mean, 3G, 4G. They say 5G, I'm now hearing by like, 2018 or 2019. Somebody in the room probably smarter about that than me. But this is, people are going to be online all the time, all over the globe. Right? So we better be prepared for that. And of course, exponential growth, the bad guys, we talked about that. I would argue the macroeconomics, right, are a lot of what's causing that, right? Because again, we're adding 800,000 new people to the internet every day. Much of that growth is in developing countries, and their socioeconomic level is lower, and so this is a great opportunity for them to go make money. And again, I'm not suggesting that's bad. I'm only saying we should pay attention to it because that's what's driving a lot of the increased risk. Make sense, hopefully, to folks? So, what can we do about this? What are some focus areas, right? Freedom and flexibility. First thing I say, enable the change, right? You're not going to stop it, and you're kidding yourself if you think you are. Now, I hope that most folks in this room, I mean, anybody in it, well, probably nobody's going to admit that, but anybody not have an acceptable use guideline on social media and that kind of thing? Anybody not have that? If you don't, you should go back to your company, and that's one of the very first things you should make sure you do. What is acceptable activity? And at least put that on a document. Whether or not people pay attention to it's a different problem, I realize. But you should certainly do that. You cannot stop it, so you need to educate to help enable it. I would argue creating a sense of ownership helps with this. And what I mean by that really is use the technology. Right? I know we got a lot of different businesses in this room, I suspect. I work for a financial services industry. But you can use a lot of these technologies. And guess what? You can use digital natives to help you implement and use the technologies. You can use Twitter. A lot of you probably already are. We were having a discussion upstairs with Larry just right before this speech, and we were kind of talking about the impact that things like Twitter can have, right? You piss somebody off and somebody's got 1 million followers, they can have one hell of an impact on your market. Don't kid yourself into thinking they can't. So learn how to use these tools to your advantage, I guess is my point. And that's just obviously a simple example of using the tools. And I think we are improving at that. Coach them and let them coach you. One thing I would tell you, the one takeaway from this whole event would be get yourself a digital native if you don't have one, mentor. Get yourself a digital native mentor, right? So if you got kids, a lot of times that works. If you don't, find somebody who is tech savvy and uses all these devices and tools and turn it into a two-way relationship on educating them so that they'll help educate and educating yourself on how to use it. Reward them every day. I know we talked about kind of instant gratification. It's a different way of thinking and et cetera. And a lot of us are traditional, once a year my boss comes in and says, gosh, James, great job, 2.4% raise, whatever it is, right? Which tells you about how bad it is most places. But you know what I mean? I mean, we're used to kind of that cycle. They're not. They're used to instant gratification, right? And so the more we learn to reward them as things happen, the better off we'll be. Recruit online. I mean, that's a good way to go recruit some of the sharpest talent. And what the statistics show is digital natives are smart. They will not come to your firm if you say, well, we make you leave your phone in a locker and you can't use any social media. I mean, it's one thing if I know we've got a guy from NASA in here. It's one thing if you're working on the next missile, right? It's another thing if you're working in a typical firm, right? There he is, right there. So, recruit online. The studies show now, the last one I saw, which I'll be honest, has probably been about 8 months ago, that background checks online, which I realize there's a whole lot of legal ramifications there, but the reality is people look online, they do background checks, even if it's not official or sanctioned by the company. So that's, it's a good way to recruit. It's also a good way to kind of vet out, who you're hiring, right? And I get that, everybody says, oh my gosh, my kids put all these crazy pictures out there, and oh my gosh, they're never going to get hired. I tend to not necessarily agree with that because I tend to think that as the digital natives come in and become the hirers, which that's I'm sure not a good word, they've got the same issue. It's just a different sense of privacy. It's not like we didn't all do the stuff. It was just less documented. That's all. At least that's what I would argue. Problem solved through crowdsourcing. So I told you guys the story about Spencer, my 21-year-old son, and that's just an example, right? I mean, you really can solve a lot of problems this way with a much faster cycle time. And a lot of innovative companies are already doing that, but honestly, folks, there's a lot that are not, at least in the research that I've done, right? Transition knowledge is power to shared knowledge is power. So that's a big change, right? I know for me, I come from the old world, boy. The senior guys, they had the knowledge, and they had it close to the vest, and you didn't know all the knowledge. And boy, that was kind of what gave you your power. And I think there's a big paradigm shift here to shared knowledge is more power, right? And that's something we all have to work on, in my opinion, to kind of make this shift happen with a little less chaos, if you will. Duck and the lawyer story. Anybody in the room know the duck and the lawyer story? I don't see a lot of hands. So there's this lawyer, this big city lawyer from Los Angeles. I'll pick on Los Angeles, right? You guys like to pick on Los Angeles, I assume? There's this big city lawyer from Los Angeles, and he's out duck hunting. I don't know, out in the foothills out here somewhere, and I don't know the area well enough to be able to talk intelligently. And he's walking along, and bang, he shoots a duck. The duck drops on the other side of this barbed wire fence, right? So he goes over there, and he gets ready to crawl over the barbed wire fence to pick up his duck. Up pulls a big John Deere tractor with the local farmer who owns the land on that side of the barbed wire fence. And he gets down off the tractor in his overalls and says, "Say there, boy, what do you think you're doing?" I'll use my Texas accent here, I guess. Sorry about that. May not fit with whatever your accent is out here in the foothills. But he says, "Boy, what do you think you're doing?" And the lawyer says, "Well, sir, I shot a duck. It landed over there in your land, and I just want to come over there and get my duck." And he said, "Well, apparently you don't understand. This is my property, not yours. You can't just come over here on my land and take your duck. It's my duck. Now it's on my land." And the lawyer bristles all up and says, "I'm a big city lawyer from Los Angeles, and by God, I'll sue you, old man, and I'll own this farm if you don't let me come over there and get my duck." And the old man says, "Well, apparently you don't know how we solve problems out here in the foothills, east of Santa Clara, right?" And he says, "Okay, old man, I'm listening. How do you solve problems out here?" And the old farmer says, "We have what we call the 3-kick rule, and it's real simple. Since it's on my property, I get to kick you 3 times. And then you get to kick me 3 times. And then I get to kick you, and we just keep kicking until somebody gives up. And then whoever gives up, they don't get the duck." And so the old man kind of grins to himself, or the young lawyer grins to himself and says, "Man, there's nothing I'd like better than to kick this old man, Okay, old man, we'll use your methodology for solving this problem. I'm on board. So the farmer gets down off the tractor, and he tightens up his overalls, and he goes over and boom, he kicks the lawyer right in the stomach. Man, the lawyer just bends over, falls on his knees. Up comes his lunch. I guess I shouldn't say that. You guys are eating lunch. Sorry about that. And he's just grimacing in pain, right? And the farmer comes around behind him and boom, kicks him right in the butt. Face first into a fresh cow patty, the guy goes. Now he's just boiling mad, when the little thing just pulses on your forehead. He's like, "I'm going to kill this old man when I get my opportunity to kick this guy." And he gets up and he kind of wipes the cow patty off his face, and the old farmer comes over, wham, gets him one more time, right in the kneecap. Now the lawyer's just limping like this. He's like, I'm just so pissed. Right? And he goes over, and he gets up, and he dusts himself off, and he wipes the rest of the cow patty off of his face, and he says, "Okay, old man, now you're in for it. You're going to get it." And the old farmer just leans back on his John Deere tractor and says, "Nah, I give up. You can have the duck." So the point of the story here, I guess, is think forward, right? Be a forward thinker. Think about what you're doing. Think about what's coming at us. Think about how the macroeconomics of the world are changing. We've got a lot of people coming onto the internet. We've got a lot of digital natives coming into our workforce. They're just coming out of college. They're just coming out of grad school. And we need to be thinking forward about how to protect the data that we've got. And so it sounds like, Carrie, we maybe have a couple of minutes for questions or comments if anybody's got a question or comment, and I appreciate you listening. Leslie has one. I know Leslie.
Yeah.
She's going to heckle me.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
So, reward them every day. I'm like lost on this because, I have worked with several digital natives. I am an immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel really plastic and weird because it's kind of like, that was really great. You did that great today. And then the next day, that was really great. And I just feel really lost. So other ideas you have, or maybe other people from the audience have ideas about what it means to reward them every day.
I think you've got the right gist, right? I mean, they're looking for more frequent, and I every day, okay, maybe I'm exaggerating there, but they're looking for a lot more frequent acknowledgement of the contribution that they're bringing. And so it doesn't have to be monetary. It can just be, hey, great job, I appreciate you bringing that in. We're just kind of not used to that, I would argue, in our traditional sense. We typically don't hear, oh, you really suck, James, until the end of the year, right? And then you're like, what? Why didn't you tell me this 6 months ago? But, I mean, they're looking for, and by the way, I say reward them, but I maybe you should change that bullet even to say both directions, right? I'm looking to the digital natives here to see if they agree or disagree, but give me feedback too. So it's okay also if it's negative. So you don't want to go down, this is my personal opinion now, you don't want to go down the path of, oh, great job, Johnny, I know you hit the ball and you ran to the wrong base. Which we have a bad habit of doing sometimes, us parents. I get that. So I guess it's a two-way street, though. Give feedback both directions, but they were looking for that much, much more instantaneously. Maybe it's once a week. I mean, what I found pretty effective, honestly, for me, is, I have, let's see, I have about 4 digital natives that work in my organization that directly interact with me. And I have bi-weekly one-on-ones with them, literally, 30-minute one-on-ones. I sit down and we talk through feedback, right, and what have you. And I realize not everybody has the calendar or the time to do that, but that's what I do.
Yeah, I really like that suggestion because I was thinking, and it probably is true of folks that are of digital native age. We used to call them something else. I don't know, millennials or something.
Bratty
like that.
kids?
No, millennials.
I'm giving them a hard time now.
But the whole notion that everybody is doing well, everybody gets a trophy, everybody nobody's a zero, all of that kind of stuff. It's a generational thing, and so that's where I'm struggling. So I like the idea of spending time with folks because I think that's meaningful. Thanks, James.
Sure. Other questions? I see one in the back there. Yes, ma'am.
I just was going to hitchhike off of Leslie's comment as far as the appreciation. I think that every single person in every company, appreciation is the one thing that people hunger and crave more than anything. And so to figure out how to adapt that, it could be as simple as doing a text message, leaving a voicemail, a quick sticky note, but just figuring out what people like and making that time to customize it so it means something to them.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what you reminded me of, hey, I work for GE. Anybody in the room not heard of Jack Welch? Probably not, right? And I realize he's been gone for a while, but that was one of his big traits, and if you've ever read any of his books, you'll know this, is he would custom write a little baby hand note. I got to tell you, it wouldn't say much, but when the CEO of the company sends you a little handwritten note in an envelope that shows up with a stamp through the post office, it's a big deal, right? And people remember that forever. You get some serious loyalty from that. Sorry, I see we have another question there, so.
I think part of the problem in your talk was using the term reward. Maybe acknowledgement, feedback, touch. Reward, to my mind, implies something physical that can be monetized. And that also is something that people come to expect. And it gets stale unless it increases, and that goes to bankruptcy. So feedback, touch, acknowledgement, might be more effective.
Absolutely. I definitely took that mental note from Leslie's earlier comment. It's a great point, right? I think I'll change the bullet to reflect feedback, both directions, both positive and negative. Thank you for the feedback.
Greg knows I love him. But Greg, reward is a gaming thing, and this generation does a lot of games. They are rewarded all the time by playing the game. That's what they're talking about when we say reward. They want that touch. They want a simple acknowledgement. Hey, good job, is what they're talking about.
I absolutely agree, or again, my opinion, I'm certainly not a psychologist or a sociologist, but I agree that some of it, I think, does come from gaming, right? And I got to tell you, there's some cool stuff. I mean, I got completely off topic here to your comment, but there's some cool stuff with gaming. And if you guys aren't playing with that, it should be, right? We're beginning to experiment with that in our workplace, like for compliance, right? Who loves compliance? Anybody? There's a couple of people that actually love compliance. That's amazing. Largely, people freaking hate compliance, right? And every year we got to go through all this compliance crap. And we've taken some of the things like SOX, 404, TODs and TOEs, and we've gamified it. And I got to tell you, it's made a huge difference, right? You've turned it into a contest. I see somebody giving thumbs up. If you're not doing this, play with it. I mean, maybe it doesn't fit your culture, but I got to tell you, I've been real impressed with the experiments that we've done in that space. Not exactly related, but sort of. And guess what they get? Frequent interaction and rewarding and feedback, whether it's positive or you lost or you won or whatever. It's two-way feedback.
Time for a couple more?
Sure.
So I guess I'll say something as one of the 3 digital natives
Okay.
in the room.
Fantastic.
And comment on the reward thing. I guess I disagree to a point because maybe some of the comments kind of sound like, I don't know, we're not zoo pets that need to be rewarded like for climbing on the tree. But I think there's something to be said there for continual feedback. But I think maybe the difference is at least for me and for a lot of my colleagues, we work in positions because we want to better ourselves and we want to get somewhere ourselves. And the moment that I feel like a company is getting more out of me than I am out of them, as far as my personal development and the satisfaction I get out of a job, I move on. And so that continual feedback that I have with my managers and my directors who say, hey, this is how this project went, this is what went well, this is went poorly, this is areas for improvement, this is where you're a star at. That type of things, those types of things help me get better as a professional. And the moment I don't feel like I'm actually getting better as a professional, I'll leave for a lesser paying job or a more interesting job just out of personal satisfaction. So I guess to the point, yeah, the reward bullet needs to change, but that's my take on it. It's not so much I need a pat on the back every day. It's just a matter of I want to continue to better myself, and if the company doesn't see any place for me to get better, I'm probably not going to stick around.
Yeah, I definitely got the message that the reward word's not good there. That's great feedback, though. But I do think you're acknowledging, I think, and I'll ask you this since we're standing here, but it wouldn't be good if you got the traditional treatment, right? Because I mean, in my old days, once a year, man, that was it. You got feedback once a year. You know what I mean? And I'm assuming you would prefer what you're saying. Give me continual feedback, good and bad, whatever it is, because that's helping me better myself. Is that a fair assessment? Okay, good.
All right, we've got time for one more.
I'm going to say a couple things about, I'm not obviously a digital native, but I have watched a lot of digital natives come from babyhood to adulthood. My husband is a retired high school teacher. And one of the interesting things that he noticed was there was a break in 1992, 93. Children born after that point and hit high school, about the time he started retiring, their brains were different. And the scary thing is, they don't remember things like the predecessors. And we've been actually watching this for about the last 20 years. Because they're constantly online, because they don't have time they don't sit back, they don't read, think, etc. There's going to be a drastic change in what's remembered, and I think it will eventually affect production, things like that. And this is a scary thing. My husband says this is like there was this real break. The kids are born at this point, starting high school, and the first time this happened, he came home and said something to me, and he's a history teacher. He's digital because of me. It's a whole different relationship. I'm the techie, he's usually the other way around.
Right.
But the interesting thing is, he came home one time and he said, I'm seeing this, it's the second year this happened. I said, these are the kids that started with computers in babyhood.
Yeah.
And that's scary because these kids have no historical sense, no literary sense, and I think it's going to hurt later on. Now, you and me, we're going to be long gone. But in 30 years,
Oh, wait a minute. What are you trying to say here?
20 years, 30 years.
Teasing.
But there is, I think by the mid 220s, 230s, there's going to be a crash, and it's going to be scary. I see other kids coming in who actually limit themselves on what they're doing on social media, and because they've seen this in their friends. And I know 2 children right now, 2 high school seniors, who have nothing to do with Facebook,
Yep.
nothing to do with it. They said they do not want that hook. They don't want people knowing things. They concentrate, and they're actually, I think, going to be much more successful than their peers.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. So the only comment I'll make there is I mean, and there's a ton of studies out there, right? I can tell you, even in my own personal experience, having a 28-year-old and an 18-year-old, there's a big difference in the way they use the technology. The 28-year-old understands the hardware and the software, I mean, to a degree. The 18-year-old, no clue, just knows I get this functionality from this application, if you will, right? So there's a difference. I think there's the interesting question, though, is it really bad, or we just don't know? Because I would tend to argue it might not be bad, right? It'll swing, right? We've swung way over here, and then history shows us, right? We'll swing back to the middle or find the happy balance. Because there's an awful lot of studies that say, so what, they don't remember, you know? I mean, if you were born in 1900, you better know how to churn butter, I don't know, or milk a cow or something.
Cultural and historical
Yeah.
knowledge that they're missing.
Oh, I get it, and you do have to have a baseline for it, but I was just looking at an article literally this week, I want to say it was in the Wall Street Journal, I can't verify that was talking about GPSs. Anybody else see this article? It's talking about GPSs, right? And I mean, there's a ton of medical studies at this point that already show, us adults too, not just the digital natives, we're losing the ability to map stuff, you know what I mean? Because we just go use the GPS, right? But I guess my only issue is that bad? I don't know if it's bad or not. It's not bad as long as we always have that GPS with us. If I had to go produce milk myself, I would be freaking lost, right? You know what I mean? I mean, and it's a bad analogy, but sort of gets to the point of it, you know, time moves on, we have other technologies. But I'm with you, I think history is important, and so is macroeconomics. And Carrie's looking at me like, oh my God, we're out of time, we got to quit, James. Is that fair?
Let's hear it for James.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Appreciate it.
James, thank you very much. James has been a great friend of Secure World for a number of years. Actually just flew in from Dallas this morning and is turning right back around to head back this afternoon. So thanks for coming in and sharing your experience with us. We appreciate that.